Who is Mr. Magic? Um, so Mr. Magic is my next adult horror novel. The premise is that the main characters 30 years before were the last cast of the longest running children's program in history. And it was a show called Mr. Magic. Everybody remembers watching it. They remember the way that they felt when they were watching it, like they were part of that circle of friends, like Mr. Magic was their friend and was watching over them and was helping them be better kids. But the last episode ended in tragedy, and the cast split up, and no one knows anything about the show. There's no recordings of it. There's no scripts. No one knows who directed it. No one knows who wrote it. No one remembers if Mr. Magic was a person. Was he an actor? Was he a puppet? Was he early CGI? No one knows. And in this age of internet archives, it's kind of one of those lingering mysteries where people will talk about what they remember with the show, but no one has any evidence. So it's all feelings and memories. But the cast is reunited because a podcaster wants to get them together to talk about their memories of the show in hopes of rebooting the show. But of course, when they get there and they get to this strange house in the desert in Utah where it was filmed, they realize that maybe the show wasn't a show. Maybe Mr. Magic was a lot more than any of them remember. And so they have to kind of confront these ideas of childhood memory and toxic nostalgia and how being perfect children on a television show has haunted them their whole lives. It was definitely all patterned on the show, right? Because the show kind of sets them up as archetypes. So you've got the mischievous kid, you've got the artistic kid, you've got the leader, you've got the good friend, you've got all these roles. And so on the show, that was their role, and they've all kind of grown into adults that were both informed and damaged by the role they were given on the show. And so, yeah, I definitely went through each one of them and I said, who are they now and who were they as a child? And what's the line? What's the line between their role on Mr. Magic and the lessons they were taught and the person they are now, the choices that they've made and the damage that they carry because of that. So my next book is called Lucy Undying, a Dracula novel. It's not a retelling. It uses Dracula sort of as a jumping off point to give Lucy Westenra, who is a fairly major character in Dracula, a new narrative. If you haven't read Dracula or if it's been a long time, Lucy is essentially the first important victim in the book. When Dracula comes to England, he identifies Lucy and over the course of several torturous chapters, repeatedly attacks her until at last she dies and comes back as a vampire. Um, and so I never liked her story in Dracula. It really bothered me. And this is where a lot of my retellings stem from. Like, I love Dracula. I think it's a brilliant novel. I think Bram Stoker was a phenomenal writer. He has lines in Dracula that are some of the most perfect descriptive lines I have ever read. But also, I don't like his treatment of women. In the book, there's very much a sense that Lucy dies because her only value is to be loved and desired. Whereas Mina, the other main female character, is described as having the heart of a woman, but the mind of a man. And she's useful and she plans travel itineraries and she takes notes and she essentially acts as the group's secretary. And because she has value and because she's a married woman and therefore not sexually desirable, she's allowed to survive. And so that doesn't sit right with me. There was also a lot of demonization of Lucy being a sexual creature, and so I wanted to give her a new narrative. I also always read Lucy as queer. She and Mina have an incredibly intense relationship that on Lucy's end, I read it as love and romantic attraction, and so I wanted to write her a new story. So Lucy Undying is a very epic book. It's got several timelines. It's got several points of view. You get new insight into who Lucy was as a teenager through her journals. I tell her undead life story as a vampire. There's also the character Iris Goldemine, who's the heir of Arthur Goldemine, one of the main characters in Dracula, trying to get away from her family, who have become this predatory multi-level marketing empire. And then I also have Dracula, and he's stalking a new victim. So there were a lot of elements that went into the book. Structurally, it went through a lot of different versions, but the heart of it always was Lucy as a character who wanted to be loved and wanted to love, but the era that she was raised in, she didn't have the language or the capacity to even know what she needed. And giving her an extra, 150 years to discover herself and to really move past the trauma of her life and death, and come into her own power and claim herself. So it was a really, really fun book to write. It was a very complex book to write, but it was a narrative that was, very, very personal and important to me to write. But in the end, I just hope the book's fun. It's bloody and gory and romantic and sweet and funny, and I really love it. I'm so proud of it. So the Sinister Summer series is a middle grade series. I actually started out my career wanting to be a middle grade author. The very first book that I wrote was middle grade, but it turns out the middle grade is actually much more difficult to write than YA or adult, because you have to make it accessible to young readers, but still tell a really good story, an engaging story. And so it took me a long time to get to be a good enough writer to be able to do it. So the Sinister Summer series is a 5-book series about Alexander and Theo Sinister Winterbottom, 12-year-old twins who are sent for the summer to live with their mysterious aunt, who they've never met and who doesn't seem to understand how children work. And she takes them to a series of increasingly bizarre summer vacation destinations where they have to solve mysteries that may or may not be supernatural. And eventually they realize that one of the biggest mysteries is their own, which is, where are their parents and why is their summer so sinister? It was so much fun to write. It's the most fun I've ever had writing anything. Unlike my other series, where by the time I get to the end, I am done. I never want to think about it again. I wrote 5 books in this series, and honestly, I could have written 5 or 10 more. I got to do a lot of wordplay. I got to do a lot of fun tongue-in-cheek references to classic literature, including Dracula. And then also I got to write a series that I would have loved to have as a kid, and that I was really happy to give to my own kids, because the main characters are not typical middle grade heroes. She's very brave, but she's also very reckless. She has a hard time sitting still. She doesn't necessarily do well in school. She has a hard time when she feels like things aren't fair, and she's very combative. Whereas Alexander is very, very anxious. He's afraid of everything. He's constantly worried about the worst case scenario. And so it was really fun getting to write a series that is playful and spooky and funny, but also, I hope, deeply kind, and views these children who maybe wouldn't fit in with your typical middle school or middle grade heroes, as strong and capable. And it was really fun getting to follow their adventures and help them learn and grow and accept who they are, and view what people might consider weaknesses as strengths.